Hey everybody, Andy Kvernen here with another Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional. You know, one of the things that's true about me, that's always been true, is I've been angsty about things that I care about. I've been passionate. That's a good way to say it, but angsty, maybe gritty is another way to say it. On the Strengths Finder test, I maybe shared with you before, I tend to score high in those achiever categories. I like to do something and check off a box and see that it's done, and to have, if I'm honest, to have my name associated with it. Not always a good quality, but is a quality that I've dealt with nonetheless. There's a character in Scripture that I can identify with pretty readily, and his name is Jacob. And in Genesis, we read of Jacob's birth with his twin brother Esau. Esau comes out of the womb first, and Jacob is grabbing at his heel as if he's trying to pull his brother back so that he can be first. And of course, we know that Esau eventually sells his birthright to Jacob, and eventually Jacob steals the blessing of their father Isaac. And eventually Esau chases Jacob off to his to a different land where Jacob goes to live with his uncle, and Jacob manipulates the process to get his uncle's daughters, and Jacob has some bad things that happen to him, and yet he bucks the system and he makes it so that he gets blessed and he gets livestock and wealth and riches and all these things. And Jacob lives a life of striving with and sometimes against God and other people. Well, Jacob is in this land with his uncle, and he's got this large family, and finally God says, you know what, you need to go back to the homeland. And Jacob realizes, well, I need to do this because God's telling me I must, but my brother's there, and my brother hates me because I stole his birthright, I stole his blessing, and I don't know what he's going to do. And true to form, on the way back, Jacob makes all these plans, and he arranges gifts to be brought to his brother. He sends out a convoy to scope out where his brother is, what's going on. He realizes his brother's coming at him with a whole bunch of men, so he organizes these gifts to be brought successively, one after the other, in hopes of softening his brother's reaction against him. Jacob, true to form, is trying to make things happen. He's trying to achieve something for himself and his family. Well, Jacob ends up, the night before he's about to meet his brother, and he sends his family across a river, and he gets to a place where he's alone with God in the wilderness. And the text says a man comes and starts wrestling with him. And the man, I'm convinced, is a theophany. This is God revealing himself to Jacob. And Jacob ends up wrestling with God throughout the night. It's this long match. It's drawn out. It's arduous. It's difficult. But the text says that Jacob is prevailing against the man. And when the man realizes, and again, this is a theophany, this is God. When the man realizes that Jacob's not going to give in, look what he does. This is Genesis chapter 32, verse 25. It says, when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then he said, let me go, for the day is broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. See what's going on here? This man who's wrestling with Jacob, this theophany, this is God, sees that Jacob is gritty. Jacob's not going to give up until he does something drastic. And so what does he do? He reaches out and he touches his hip. And all of a sudden, Jacob is injured. He's impaired. He can't wrestle anymore. And yet, the text says he hangs on, and God says to Jacob, look, you need to let me go. It's time. You're broken. Jacob says, I won't do it unless you bless me. Notice what happens next. This is really profound. And God said to Jacob, and that text actually says, and he said to him, what's your name? What's your name? Friends, in the ancient Near East, when a person in authority asked the name of somebody else, they wanted them to submit to their authority by giving him their name. And so God says to Jacob, look, it's time for you to be done with this rigmarole. It's time for you to be done striving against me and against other people. You need to submit to your own fallibility, to your own brokenness, and give me your name. Well, to Jacob's credit, look, listen to what happened. It says, and he said, Jacob. And he said, Jacob. He submitted to God's authority, finally. He was broken before God. And in his brokenness, he finally submitted to God's lordship over him. And then it says, then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. You know, I can think back over my life and that natural bent towards drivenness, towards angstiness. I could tell you all kinds of stories of how that manifested early on. And I could tell you all kinds of stories of how it still manifests itself. But one of the things the Lord has done for me at varying times throughout my life is He's touched my hip. He's made me aware of my own fallibility. He's allowed me to be broken. And perhaps sometimes He's actually done the work of breaking me, of making me weep over different things that I couldn't control. And I was trying to control, but I couldn't. But in that, He said, Andy, what's your name? What's your name? Will you submit to me? Will you trust me? And as I've learned more and more readily in those moments to say, I'm Andy and I'm yours, what I've found is that the blessing is so much greater. Friends, if you're striving today against God, against other people, allow the Lord to touch you in the hip, to break you. And in that, may you experience His blessing. And if you're in that place of brokenness and God says, what's your name? Tell Him, and be blessed. God bless you, friends. Lord willing, we'll see you again in the Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional.